Okay, well, welcome. I know others will be joining us. I'm going to try another something new, or I may get a whiteboard or go to my office, but I don't know how well that works. So I have a sheet that I'm going to hold up when I go over the problems, specifically the math problems. So, and let me cover that. We had a couple of questions about two questions, one on each quiz for this week. I tend not to do this, but for some reason it slipped. There are two questions, one on each, that appear to be the same question. They are the same question, but they have different choices of what to, in terms of the answer. So you have to look at the choices really, really closely, which changes the answer. I think one of them is all the above, and the other one is one choice. I think it's number 3 on quiz 7. The A, B, C, D choices are different, especially B is different, which throws off the all the above. And the next quiz, same thing. So you have to read them closely. Again, I apologize. I tend not to do that because I always miss those on quizzes, but for some reason, I thought they were quite interesting. So appreciate you pointing that out, and that does happen occasionally. So I apologize for that. Okay, let's go through some high points. Very interesting chapters, all about competition. And this is where the textbook and material is so cutting edge, let's say, because it talks about real life industries, competition therein, and the involvement in the somewhat of the political policy that's tied into our business environments. Some of your industries, companies you work for, like hospitals, are highly regulated. Others aren't. The horse industry is becoming highly regulated in terms of, I have a friend in the breeding business, and he was saying that perhaps some of the Middle Eastern customers of his are thinking twice about trying to come over here, even for a short-term visit. But money talks in that realm. But first part of chapter 9 deals with a competitive firm. Here's the main characteristic of a competitive firm is you have so many competitors in the industry or in the market. And there's a definition of what an industry is I tend to interchange industry with market. Industries that make similar products, extremely similar products, like the soft drink industry is, no matter if you can actually tell the difference between a Pepsi and a Coke, they're in the same industry in terms of what economists, because they behave the same way. They certainly compete, all different varieties, fast food, so on and so forth. Some industries operate in a local or regional market, but it's still the same thing. So economists describe a competitive market in which there is enough competition where basically a firm has to charge very similar prices as their competition, or they're going to lose the business to whoever charges relatively a lower price, especially one that as a consumer we see. You see this in shopping, trying to look for discounts, companies that have coupons. We look for the cheapest price, and we will actually, if it's reasonable, get in our car and travel out to malls, so on and so forth. I'm sure We visit those. So their retail places are very, very competitive. So that's what we mean. And there's a little bit math in there that Chapter 9 and 10 are talking about movements of financial capital, which is cutting edge, well, not cutting edge, but describes really the real marketplace in terms of, and an important aspect of a competitive firm or industry is there's no legal barriers, there's no huge cost barriers of entry, and of course, any company can actually exit a market. Some actually are too big to fail, so the government props them up, but those industries are not competitive. In terms of the automobile industry, if you look at just the domestic market, the U.S. market, if we just not allowed foreign cars to, foreign-made companies to come in to sell their automobiles, then it certainly would be not a competitive market. But in the short run, we see price is greater than marginal cost, but as more and more companies come in looking for economic profit always occurs when price is greater than marginal cost. Price is also marginal revenue. So we see if price is greater than average cost, then companies are going to come in. If price is lower than average cost, companies fail. So in equilibrium in the long run, meaning what we see in a market with an industry is if there's no price changes over some type of period of time. We don't see new startups coming in all that fast. That's what we call a competitive market that is stabilized. And that's what's called the long run, where we see prices not changing a whole lot in and not a whole lot of companies wanting to start, especially without governmental help. When you see companies, firms trying to go to the Small Business Bureau and so on and so forth to get help with loans, that's when an industry is very, very stable, when there's a competitive market. So food for thought there. If you're thinking about entering or starting your own business, buying a business, and you might have a lack of capital, which usually means it takes a lot of capital to get in to compete with others. So you may want to think twice about that. Now, a concept you may have never heard of is regression to the mean. This is where, again, mobile capital. What that means is people investing, starting a business in an industry, starting a restaurant, and investors willing to invest, give other people money to start a business or also grow a business. The indifference principle means it's stable. It's stable. Just think, again, I have occasionally students, other people come to me and say, well, I want to start my own business. I did, nothing wrong with that. I chose one where there's hardly any competition. So that does help. It sort of relies on how much I can market. But the indifference principle is there isn't any economic profit. So capital is literally indifferent, meaning people, investors will not look for change. Whenever you're investing in the stock market or starting a business, you always look for the opportunity where you're going to make more money, more profit, right? That's what you look for. And it also talks about wages, and this is something I studied. And it may not be usually industries that pay higher wages. It's more risky type of environment is heavy competition. The product they actually would make or the service. I had a friend in the business, and his business was cleaning up toxic waste. Heavily dependent upon the government, but he had to pay his employees a lot more money because it's a very risky business. So we see what's called compensating wages. And also we say compensating wages where the cost of living is high. So you would expect to make more money, your salary or wages higher, like in New York City where it's more costly to live for the same position. Louisville is somewhat more attractive to people. The wages aren't particularly high compared to other places, but traditionally the cost of living isn't as great. So that's what it's meant there. The same principle works in stock returns bonds, where the more risky stocks, new ventures, there's a lot of them now that you can buy for a penny. Bitcoin, the Bitcoin industry is an example of that, where you can buy literally a Bitcoin stock for 50 cents, though are very, very risky. Those, you can buy Bitcoin, which is very, and I'm using Bitcoin, the name, to stand for many other things, but doesn't have a premium to it. In other words, the payoff only comes when somebody else wants to buy it. Now, we don't really see that, so you may not want to invest in something like that. The last part of Chapter 9 talks about monopoly. This is the opposite of the competitive industry, where usually, like a utility, they have no competition. But sometimes the elasticity of demand, price demand is higher, which may force price down to marginal revenue or average variable cost. Not so much utilities, but we see industries that near monopolies, like the health industry. I talk about privately held companies. Insurance companies are like this, where I think we're down to maybe nationwide 4 or 5 health insurance companies. Mary Lou, correct me on that. There are some more, but they're not strictly monopolies with a single business in it, but there's very few. So what we see is consolidation, trying to decrease their price elasticity of demand. That always happens when, like, for example, if Humana is purchased by Walmart, okay, Walmart does a lot of other things than just have health insurance, but Humana only has health insurance really dependent upon Medicare and Medicaid. So if they're purchased, that's going to put pressure on the rest of the health industry, because Walmart probably will offer health insurance cheaper. See, so if we have substitutes, that's got to lower the price in the industry, at least in theory. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions about Chapter 9? And I'll go over the problem in a minute. Well, maybe I should do that now. Let me go over the problem in Chapter 10. You all see this clearly? Anybody not?
It's a little low.
How about that?
Higher. Over to the. There you go.
Okay. Knowing the formula is one thing, but you got to put in the right numbers. So I'm showing it there now. Is the answers are the marginal cost is $5, the price is $7.50. But the right things you put in are what we're looking for is the marginal
Dr.
cost.
Dooley, we can't see the bottom part.
How about that?
No.
Let me start with the first problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, everybody see the marginal cost formula?
Gotta go up again.
Pull it up a little bit more.
How about that? Okay. So you have to sort of tell me, because I can't see you now.
No. It needs to go up some more.
Okay. How about that?
There you go.
Okay. So you see the figures there. You're solving for marginal cost. So you have to put in the price minus MC over 10. Which comes out to be, or equal to a half, which is 5, 1 over 2 is 5. And then you solve for marginal cost, which is 5. Any questions about doing that formula? You have to put in the right figures. Okay, now can you see the second part, price? You use the same formula. So the first part is price P minus 5 over the price equals 1/3.
You're gonna need to hold it up.
Raise it up a little.
There you
Okay. So there you go. Any questions?
Back up again.
And what makes this price different than the marginal cost? With a competitive market, you would say price equals marginal cost. But here we have elasticity of demand that's very elastic because it changes.
Dr. Bewley, that needs to go up. We can't see it. There
Okay,
you go.
how about now?
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody need me to keep holding? Okay, I'm going to put it down. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right. Well, that's a crude way of doing that.
Can you walk us through that equation so that I understand? Because I got the first part, I had trouble getting through the second part.
Sure. Yeah, the equation is price minus marginal cost over price. Okay, that's the left-hand part. The right-hand part is 1 over the elasticity measure. Okay, that's the first elasticity measure. So plugging in the figures here, you start with the old price of $10 with the elasticity of -2, and you take out the minus there. That may have thrown people off. The way the textbook writes the formula is it begins with -2, but you take the absolute value of it. It's just 2. Because you don't want to end up with a negative price. There's no such thing. So it's 10 minus MC, because you're solving for marginal cost, over 10 equals 1/2. And 1 divided by 2 is 5.
I got that side.
Uh-huh.
I got my marginal cost of 5. It's the other side that and it's fine. I don't want to hold everybody
The other
else
side?
up. So,
Okay. Yeah. We want to move, it should be 10 minus MC equals 5. And then you want to move to the right-hand side, MC. So negative MC, move to the other side. You want to get rid of MC on the left side, you add MC to both sides. Minus MC plus MC is 0. So then you just move it to the other side, then you solve for MC, marginal cost, so you move the 5 to the left side. 10 minus 5 is 5.
Okay.
Yeah, any questions about finding the price? Here you have to divide. Okay, very good. The second, the chapter 10, excuse me, is, I'll take a drink here, is not so much economics, some economics, but industrial organization theory is what is strategy. This first is a economic way of looking at it is Strategy comes down to this. For a business is to increase economic performance, make more profit, figuring out a way to increase price or reduce cost, or actually both. You reduce cost by creating a comparative advantage. And we know this occurs is for your companies or your horse farm or whatever. If you find yourself in a very competitive company firm that has to compete with price, what we see are companies trying to lower cost. Retail business. I studied Walmart, relatively extensive. And if you are familiar with the big boxes, especially right now, they have to compete with price, so they're always looking to lower cost. Their whole business model is based upon that, is buy in bulk, supply, get their own trucks. They want to compete in the price by lowering costs so they can beat their competition in cost, so they can charge a lower price. And they will lower cost by, in the short run, by laying off people. So you go into Walmart, there may be 2 cashiers and so on and so forth. So that's the comparative advantage, is cost. That relates to being able to charge a lower price, which drives other businesses out. Now they have another problem, is they can't cut cost anymore because we're buying online. Oh, excuse me. And they have rented or built these big stores. And most people project that you won't see them in the future. They won't build anymore. Even malls are going out of business. And the second part of the chapter is all about how to achieve a comparative advantage outside of cost reduction. And that is creating barriers within the industry. Is what we see industries doing is running to government for protection. And that is partly why we see the current administration in placing tariffs on foreign products to protect those industries so they can maintain a higher price, okay, so they can make profit. Now, those industries, and I'm sort of biased here because I'm speaking from an economist, we economists try to look in favor of consumers, us. We consume steel by buying, buildings, so on and so forth, aluminum, foreign companies, Canada, we buy a lot of Canadian steel. We buy other natural resources from China. We don't particularly buy steel from them, but those countries have comparative advantage because they either have more, their technology is better, like Canada, natural resources to make steel and other things. China has the entire market of silicon, the product that goes into chips. They have the entire natural resource. So that's comparative advantage. There's nothing we can do to put tariffs on them because we can't produce it ourselves. So to eliminate competition, to increase comparative advantage, we see industries going to government for protection, patents, so on and so forth. Spend a lot of money creating strong brands. Bigger companies spend a lot of money on creating our desire to buy them. High capital requirements, creating bigger, long economies of scale, being able to produce a lot cheaper. The automobile industry did this, is locating plants everywhere. The next model is called the 5 forces. It's also somewhat called Six Sigma. But here's where companies sort of cooperate with each other. But this part of the chapter is all about rivalry. That's what leads to the last thing is competition, competition, competition. And we see even less competition when a industry is resource-based. The mining industry, just as in coal, the most profitable one is gold, copper. And early mining companies were given preference by the federal government back in the 19th century because it was dangerous to mine that, whereas only so much gold, only so much copper. And those companies that have those rights to mine gold and so on have a huge comparative advantage and less rivals. So the art of strategy is creating a comparative advantage, obtaining a natural resource that's so scarce, or lowering cost, developing technology which makes their price different or lower, becoming bigger, and eliminating competition either by buying them, merging, or that's basically it. So problem set 9, you have a table there, is applying the concept of rivalry among competitors. And this should be, some of you have already submitted this and got it actually backwards. In terms of the question is, is higher rivalry, which means there's more people, more companies in the market. If you have it's like rivals mean for price and so on and so forth. So the answers are, well, if there's greater numbers of firms, the degree of rivalry is much higher, right? If you have less competition, you really don't have any rivals. Back in the start of fast food industry, McDonald's had few rivals. But as time passed, you had more and more fast food chains starting, Burger King, on and on and on. Now they have lots of rivals. They still have a large market share, but they behave in a way of competing. Fixed cost. If fixed costs are lower, you're going to have more rivals. Now, you may approach that by, well, fixed costs are higher, but the correct answer is you have higher rivalry. Level of product differentiation is, that means we can tell the difference between products within an industry. Or you have there's a certain brand that everybody wants. The rivalry is low, meaning you don't have the competition. Industry growth, that means that like in the search engine industry and so on and so forth, software, where you have the strongest companies are going to grow the faster, and the ones that can't keep up are going to be merged with the more profitable ones or just drop out. Buyer switching cost, meaning lower cost, you're going to have domination, you're going to have a comparative advantage by certain companies. So the rivalry is low, competition is low. You have to really think about this and interpret it correctly, and also he answered in the textbook. So 2 highs, 3 lows. It's just how you interpret that. If you've already submitted and got it wrong, resubmit it. Okay, that worked last time. Because I want you to get that right. It's just the way you interpret the question. I'm sure that's why you might have slipped up on that. Okay, questions? I think the Moodle is working pretty well.
I just wanted to make sure the highs were number of firms and industry growth, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, I'm sorry. That's not right. Oh, it's number of firms and fixed cost are the high ones. And the rest of them are low.
Okay, Dr. Bewley, can you explain industry growth again then, why it would be low?
Yes, industry growth means there's more companies entering the market. Okay, example would be, well, Bitcoin. I mean, I think there's 1,500 now that have the cyber currency, and more and more and more and more because there's profit to be made right now, but it's volatile. So you see more and more companies. So it's Rivalry would be. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. Industry growth means that the big companies are absorbing the others. So see, I've got it wrong. How you interpret that?
Okay.
So any other questions about the course or the last 4 weeks changes focus a little bit to ends up with the principal agent problem again. Wages and so on and so forth. And I just want to remind everybody is the end of the course quiz or exam is a compilation of the best questions. And I would, I've already put it on there, but you should do all right with it. Okay, our time's up. See you next week. Have a good week.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.